Welcome to the Irish NFL show in association with QuinnBet. It's our last review and recap show of the regular season as we look back on the Week 18 action. Before we go any further, just thanks to everyone who joined us last night in our first ever live Red Zone watch-along. Myself, Brian and Shane were out in Greco Studios, our new partner, Greco Studios and Freeform Media, helping us with the studio setup, and the team there, Mark, Colin, Graham and John, brought us to air from our first ever live broadcast for a Red Zone watch along. Really enjoyed it, and a lot of you tuned in for that as well. You can check out the replay on YouTube at your leisure on the Irish NFL show channel, but very, very enjoyable experience. I know, Kieran, you were watching along as well. Fair play to you in advance of your instant reaction pod last night, which you can still catch on the podcast platform of your choice. But stay tuned for more of that. We'll be doing more from the Greco Studio setup. The lads there really, really helped us, and it was great. Made us all look beautiful, Brian, and takes a lot of work for that to happen, at least in my own case. A sprightly young fella like yourself doesn't need the same level of CGI and makeup support that I need. But to the Week 18 action now.
A couple of years, Connor, maybe.
Yeah, because Steelers needed... The Steelers needed the Ravens to miss, and the Panthers needed the Falcons to hold off the Saints as the AFC North and NFC North winners were decided in the final seconds of the last games of the regular season. And so the 14 places and seedings are now all locked in. Kieran O'Donovan, Brian O'Leary and myself, Conor Brophy, will look back at how it all went down in a moment. But first, let's get up to speed on developments in the NFL over the last day, because the Browns, Raiders, Cardinals and Falcons at last counts, and the Falcons, despite winning on the last day of the season, all fired their head coaches. Brian, any of these coaches hard done by? I mean, for me, one of the ones that slightly stood out, and not that it was a massive shock because, you know, results haven't gone their way this season, certainly, was Kevin Stefanski. He's a two-time coach of the year. He's led the Browns twice to the playoffs. Once when they won a playoff game, which is the first time in a long time that had happened. They had the longest playoff drought without a win until the Lions managed to square theirs away 2 seasons ago. I would imagine he's the kind of coach who will be snapped up. I don't think he'll have to wait a year or go into offensive coordinator purgatory. I think Stefanski is a guy that a lot of organizations who have a slightly better record for competence, shall we say, than the Cleveland Browns might fancy a cut at Kevin Stefanski.
He's been heavily linked to the Giants already, Connor, which doesn't come as a surprise, bearing in mind what you've alluded to there, 2 times, twice bringing the Browns to the playoffs. I don't think it was a surprise. I think it was just one of those situations that's evolved over time, and sometimes it's a fresh start for everybody. He'll probably go on and have a good career still coaching elsewhere. I think for the Browns, I think it's just it's come to the stage where they need to start looking at alternatives. And I think it was
ESPN's Adam Schefter today, if I'm quoting correctly and attributing correctly, who said he's the Mike Vrabel of this coaching cycle. A team is going to be very happy that the Browns gave up on him.
He's the only Mike Vrabel of this coaching cycle, and he's the only Ben Johnson, shall we say, as well, Connor, because we don't have those scenarios this year. We spoke about it last night. There's only a handful of jobs that you could argue there's going to be a tier, isn't it? Like you even said it last night, with all due respect, like the Giants are probably the standout job in terms of people are suggesting the players they've got at their disposal. Young quarterback, track the players on offense, come back, defense players are there. We ran through the list last night. You look at the other alternatives. I now maybe put the Falcons up there,
and it's the market as well, right? This is the place you want to be. Like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. The song says that for a reason.
Yeah, but do you? Because what was that thing a few years ago? Remember John Mara said about Brian Dable? Be careful. One minute you look like Bono, the next year you could look like Bozo. Well, that's how it's played out, isn't it, for Brian Dable? Because he's only had one really successful year, and thereafter it's been a complete disaster. And we could get into the merits of why the GM gets to remain in situ.
You're going to see next weekend, and Kieran Donovan's Packers will be part of it as well. If there was a roof on Soldier Field, it would lift off next week. Like, you bring success, even getting to the playoffs for a big market team, for a city like that, the hundreds of success, and they will write your name in legend. It means more in a place like Green Bay, but it has a bigger impact in a place like Chicago or New York.
Well, it does because they've been starved of success for so long. Like the Bears are story franchise, the Giants are story franchise, so are the Packers. Like the Packers have had some years. This is the level of expectation. The Packers are up here. The Packers fans are going into a season expectations championship game. Like even when they were making championship games a couple of years ago, and we're going a little bit off kilter, but like they were making championship games, and that wasn't enough for the Packers fan base because they were getting to the stage where they were used to that. It's a bit like what we said last night about the Steelers, and I know we're going to talk about Sunday Night Football. What do you want as a Steelers fan? I know Barry there, tongue in cheek, is saying, "Am I not entertained?" Yeah, I hold my hands up. I picked the Ravens. I was like, what, a split of a post away from being correct on that game. Like, that game easily could have went the other way. Like, you saw Mike Tomlin's press conference afterwards where he said, what would have been the narrative if he had lost that game? Yeah, well, if my auntie, my uncle, and all the rest. So I throw the Falcons into the mix, Connor. I think what's evolved over the last 24 hours, because when you see the nature of the press conference at the end, Arthur Blank shaking Morris's hand, it didn't look like that was that was something that was coming down the turnpike. And yeah, here we are a few hours later. He's gone. The GM is gone. And they played reasonably well over the back end of the season. And when we spoke about it last night and we spoke about it throughout the course of the season, the Falcons on paper have the best panel, best roster in that division, and yet you just can't find a way to get over. Coach going in there, looking at that NFC South, Panthers are the champions by default, you could say. The Falcons, whoever goes in there, will think he's a real opportunity.
And Kieran, if we're talking about attractive vacancies, I mean, in a funny way, actually, the one that Kevin Stefanski was fired from is quite attractive. I know you don't have the quarterback, but you got a really good rookie class there. You got cap room. The Deshaun Watson contract, the cursed contract from one of the worst trades in NFL history, is finally tapering off over the next season or two. So that could be a place from which to rebuild, particularly when you look at the Bengals in flux, the Ravens potentially in flux this offseason after what happened, and we'll get to that game shortly. Steelers probably moving on from Aaron Rodgers after the season, regardless of what happens, because Father Time is against him. Falcons, as Brian said, is an attractive opportunity because of the division you're in as well. You're going into a division where, 8 and 9 was enough to win it this year, right? Success could be instant. And a lot of owners and general managers are looking around seeing, Brian mentioned Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Liam Cohn. These are guys who walked in year one and literally took their teams from worst to first in their divisions, all division champions, all going to the playoffs. That's how quickly it can change if you get the right bum in the right seat at the right time.
Yeah, and it's like the Falcons is one that is a team that jumps out to me, and I know we Kieran is kind of the Jets of the South, but you hit the nail on the head. You want to go into a division where you can. I can't remember who said it, but the key to coaching success is win early and often. I think it might have been Don Shula back in the day. Win early and often, because if not, you're going to be under pressure. It's go back to the kicking situation early in the year, the misfortune that Jude McAtamney had, and we said, how do you survive in the league? You score, you show. You have success early and often, and you can earn the right to have a bad day. You can earn the right to have a bad season. I mean, Charlie Smith has missed a couple of kicks in the last couple of weeks, and nobody's talking about it, and rightly so, because he had success early and often. But getting back to coaching, that's just where you want to be. You want to be in a division where you can succeed. And just getting back to the point, like it's going to be a funny off season because we don't have an obvious. We don't have a Mike Vrabel. We don't have a Ben Johnson. We don't have even an Aaron Glenn was probably really hyped up last year. Nobody is really salivating at the thought of any of these guys going into a new job.
You're looking at, and I'm looking at some of the candidates who've already had interviews requested. So the Titans have requested interviews with Matt Nagy, Chiefs offensive coordinator. He was former Bears head coach, so it will be second time around for him.
Steve Spagnuolo is rumored to be,
he's also he's interviewing with the Titans. The Titans also looking at Lou Anarumo, the Colts defensive coordinator. Again, and there's how quickly a career can turn around, right? He gets fired last year. He turns things around with the Colts, and now he's a head coaching candidate. He lost his defensive coordinator job this time last year with the Bengals because he was the fall guy. And Vance Joseph is probably one of the most talked about candidates because of what the Broncos have done. But we talked about this yesterday in the live show. The problem with hiring a defensive coordinator as your head coach, and this was the land that the Bears lived in for many years, is even if he hits, you're going to lose your offensive coordinator and you're going to have to start with a new OC after a year or two. And look what happened to the Lions this year when they lost Ben Johnson. It's better to have a lot of organizations go this way now, and it's the fashion to have your Sean McVay, to have your Kyle Shanahan, to have your Ben Johnson or whoever the next offensive mastermind is, because you ain't going to lose him in charge of your offense if the offense goes well.
And there's so many twists and turns left to come as well. And, I think of my own team, the Packers. I mean, there's rumors this week that Ed Policy is interested in potentially the thought of a Kevin Stefanski if things, if the Packers go one and done, because you talk about, being in this purgatory and being a spoiled franchise, having consistent success. But the problem is by human nature, we're designed to overreach. And if nobody wants to rest on their laurels. And if let's say if you're in a situation where the Packers fail at the first hurdle next week, and you can point to a moment and look at Matt LaFleur and say he could have coached a bit better, because there have been moments that would feed into that narrative in key moments in playoff games in the last couple of seasons. There is going to be a bit of a clamoring for it.
What's the sense in the fan base, Kieran? Because I'm fascinated by this. Because I'm looking at it from the outside, and from a particular point of view from the outside as a Bears fan. But I would think you slide into the 7th seed again. You're in the wild card again. Like Lafleur's, I don't know what the KPIs were when they discussed it this year, but surely it must have been win the division, home games in the playoffs, get to a championship game, which they still might do. And let's bear in mind, the last time they won the Super Bowl, they went a long way around, and that was the best thing for them. So I ain't writing them off. But if they don't do it this season, if you don't get to at least a championship game, then there's been zero progress.
There's a growing sense of frustration that in the big moments, he's not the guy, that he's an excellent coach. I think he's an excellent man manager as well. But like you can point to, the NFL is littered with the carcasses of failed excellent coaches. I mean, you Jeff Fisher, you Tony Dungy, who couldn't get over the line with the Bucs years ago. What's his name? Marty Schottenheimer had years and years of success, but lost his job on multiple occasions because he just couldn't get to the next step. The whole you can't win the big one kind of narrative. And there is a growing sense of frustration with Matt LaFleur, but you know how quickly narratives can change. I mean, if he does have a bit of a success and can go on a run, things will change very, very quickly again. But, I think he's been a victim of a lot of bad luck and, a lot of the injuries. But there have been moments where, I've mentioned Craig's phrase so many times this evening. He couldn't get out of his own way. He just looked like a rabbit in the headlights. And that has probably happened once or twice too often in Matt LaFleur's career. I think back to I can't remember, was it the Bucs or 49ers game in the NFC Championship as well, where there was just moments where, he could have been a little bit more assertive, could have been a little bit more decisive in key moments. But again, you go on a run, you save your job. It's as simple as that. And like
to your point about as to why he might be on the hot seat. No apologies, I got carried away and jumped in, as is my wont. But to your point about the GM looking at this, the current patron saint or lay saint of GMs is Howie Roseman at the Eagles. He fires Doug Peterson when Doug Peterson can't win a second Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the standard that they set. They go out and get themselves another coach, and whatever you might say about Nick Sirianni, he's taken them to 2 Super Bowls and won 1. So if I'm the Packers and I'm looking at that, I'm saying, well, we don't have to be fixated on the idea that Matt LaFleur is the guy. Maybe we need another guy.
Yeah, and like you can have the attitude that if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just you don't want to hire the next guy who brings them to 3-4 losing seasons in a row. And like this, as I said, there's more twists and turns.
But LaFleur gets snapped up as an offensive coordinator.
100%.
Really, like, for my money, he is the best offensive mind in the league. He may not be the best head coach in the league, but he's the best offensive mind for my money.
There's a world in which you could have multiple combinations. I don't demote Matt LaFleur as a head coach to a play caller, to an offensive coordinator. But there's a world, and you laugh at me because I've been so critical of him. But my dream team I think in Green Bay would be, because you may well lose Jeff Hafley as well, who may interview for head coaching jobs. But picture Matt LaFleur as the main man, Mike McDaniel calling the plays, Big Bob Saleh defensive coordinator. That's my coaching. That's my coaching dream team. But I just think if you took the play calling, if you got another really good offensive mind in terms of play calling, I think Matt LaFleur is a really good man manager. I think he's managed some situations excellently with the likes of Jair Alexander and the likes of Romeo Dobbs, off-field incidents that barely made headlines. He just dealt with them, and I feel like there's a great sense of he is the guy to lead them. It's just
as we've said before. Like I hear people grumbling around the league. Why do the Packers end up finding all these gems in the second round and third round? Where do they get these receivers from? They coach them better than other teams. They're not hitting on every wide receiver. They know how to coach these guys up, and he knows how to coach those guys up, and he gets the most out of them.
Yeah, and it is, and it's my only damnation of him is just those moments. And if you could have him take a step back, just be the guy in Jordan Love's ear, just to say, calm down, this is what we need from you here now, and have someone else calling the plays. I think it's a potential winner, but I don't think you're going to get that either.
Well, I'll tell you who is a serial winner, at least until he gets to the playoffs these days, is Mike Tomlin, Brian, and he did it again. Steelers were not favoured, although I picked them. They did manage to pull it out literally by hook or by crook, and they're back in the playoffs, baby. They get it done every single year. It was fire Tomlin 3 games ago, and now he's back in the playoffs.
But they were very fortunate last night, Connor. Let's be fair. And in fairness, what I would say is they're down by 10 points early. Nothing's going for them It looked like Derrick Henry was going to have a night in terms of his running ability, and he was really kind of finding holes. Lamar Jackson, well, even despite his injury concerns, was finding avenues. But they shut them. They shut them down throughout the course of the second half. And I thought even before halftime, going for that touchdown just prior to halftime with the 2 seconds to go, I thought that was actually going to come back to bite them. They missed an extra point. Their secondary, which has gone missing for quite large parts of the season, kind of because we spoke about it time and time again. It's such an unusual secondary. They come up big in games against the likes of the Colts and other games where they really need to have it. And then last night, they've obviously got to have it, but they go missing. And not like twice over, their secondary got done for touchdowns. And you think, right, this just is not going to be there now. And I said last week, Aaron Rodgers was brought there for scenarios like you're down by 4, 2 minutes on the clock. And I thought that's why they would have got it done last week. 2 opportunities in Cleveland. Well, he got it done last night, but still, the story wasn't written because, unfortunately, for a rookie kicker, he's going to have a long off season to think about it. I thought, we're talking about head coaches, and we're talking about head coaches that are potentially be on the block because there's been a conversation around one of these not being in situ next season, depending on the result. To see Harbaugh walking off the field with his arm around the kicker, I thought that was fantastic to see because in that situation where he may feel like his career in terms of coaching the Ravens on the line, he wasn't even thinking about that. He was thinking about the fact that his young kicker, after missing a big moment in his career, and he was straight over to put his arm around him, going to the tunnel. Despite the loss, I thought that was lovely to see. Look, the Steelers, whoever came out of that game last night, Conor, we said it last night, are going to have a real test because this Texans team, I know I'm writing off what we've seen from the Texans defensively over the last few weeks because over the course of the season, from about midpoint, they've been arguably the best defense in the league, and that's the defense I expect that will show up on Monday Night Football next week. It's going to be a stellar test. But it's back to the point we made yesterday. Conor, what the Steelers fans want? Well, they wanted a playoff game. They've been arguing they've been wild card. They're going one and done on the road. Well, now they've got a home game. So let's see what's going to happen next week. They've got the home game. It's all there in front of them. The fact that are they favourites? I haven't had an opportunity. There's a 3-point swing.
No, they're not. And the Texans are shorter. I'm guessing that they're not because I looked at the overall sample. Texans are 13-1 to win the Super Bowl, and the Steelers are 25-1, I think. So
yeah, well, the spread with Quinn is 3 points. Yeah, it's a 3-point spread with Quinn. I just didn't go to the trouble of checking who was leading on the 3 points, but kind of reflective of what everyone expects, a tough, tight game, but they feel the Texans are going to come out on top. It'll be interesting to see the selections during the week on this one.
Kieran, I was thinking of the Ravens this morning and that Trent Reznor 9 Inch Nails line. They played a great concert in Dublin last year in the 3 Arena, but I hurt myself today to see if I could feel. I focused on the pain, the only thing that's real, like again. And you made a point just a couple of weeks ago. What is it about the Ravens that individual mistakes keep costing them so badly in key moments? And I know there's a meme that Kieran Boyle shares in the WhatsApp group. Way over there, that's where you take that bullshit. I don't have any time for the Tyler Loop cost the Ravens the playoffs. Tyler Loop didn't cost the Ravens the playoffs. Poor coaching decisions, poor playing decisions, poor performances in big spots cost the Ravens. It's a 53-man roster and a big coaching staff, and they're collectively to blame for what happened. That's the nature of the sport, and there should be no pile-on on Tyler Luke because they shouldn't have been in that position. They shouldn't have started the season 1-5. That's where the damage was done. They left themselves with way too much to do. But it is striking that Derrick Henry fumbles, Mark Andrews drop in the playoffs last year, Tyler Loop kick. I suppose the point is they keep finding themselves in situations that based on the talent that they have, they shouldn't be in the first place. It shouldn't come down to those mistakes. And it does because of how collectively they somehow can't manage to get it together.
Jimmy Barry Murphy said it after the Bears gave up a terrible lead in the All-Ireland. Was it the All-Ireland semi-final, wasn't it? Or Munster football final a few weeks ago. He was asked how they kind of... There was a very, could be looked at a very harsh situation to end the game where the referee brought a free up 50 yards, and he simply said, we shouldn't have been in that situation anyway. We put ourselves in that situation by letting the game get away from us. So that's what the Ravens have done. Derrick Henry's carries dropped as the game went on. Derrick Henry traditionally gets stronger as the game goes on. I mean, he traditionally, he's one of he's the outlier back in the league, and everybody knows it. It's like he powers up for the fourth quarter, and they just stopped using him. Why couldn't they have done that last week against the Packers? Why couldn't they shit the bed last week? But and I tricked myself then 1 week where they did everything right, and they did everything they were supposed to do last week, and I tricked myself then into picking them this week. And I listened to the Check the Mic check the My podcast with our friend Sam Monson, and they called it again. He said there's a pattern to these Mike Tomlin wins. He wins these games that he's absolutely not supposed to win. He loses the first round of the playoffs. However, he wins on Monday night. So next week they've said is an enigma because something is going to give next week because they're Monday night in the playoffs. I think is the first time. And just a quick point that the guys made as well on the Texans is the fact that the Steelers might be one of the few teams built, to take on this Houston Texans defense, because with all the screen passes, with all of the check downs and the shuffle passes, one thing that Aaron Rodgers can do at the moment is get the ball out really, really quick. And so if he can negate the pass rush, they're getting over 60% of their yards after the catch. Their receiving yards after the catch. They're getting a huge amount of their padding stats through these big tight ends, these running backs in the receiving game. And then you bring back DK Metcalf, who has a stay of execution. He's got away with it. You bring him back into a stuttering offense, and all of a sudden, I think there's going to be a really, really good feeling in Pittsburgh next week. And
now, frankly, we can thankfully forget about that wigged arsehole of a Lions fan and not even mention his name ever again.
Yeah, 100%. But it's how quickly things can change, because you were at 44-yard field goal away from the fire Tomlin chance, and you may very well win a game against the Head next week and do something they haven't done in years.
Conor, you know what I'd love to see? Sorry, just jump in quickly. And obviously it depends on the seedings and how it plays out. I'd love the Steelers to go into Denver. I'd love for Rodgers to have a go at Denver. Because if you recall that draft night a couple of years back where for an hour leading up to it, and Adam Schefter went out on a limb and said Aaron Rodgers is going to be traded to Denver this evening, and obviously that never came to pass, and poor Adam Schefter was left carrying the can because Aaron Rodgers went, no, nothing to do with me, even though he was leaking the story out. If he was to go in there and have that is it a conversation to be said that the Steelers couldn't go in there? If you recall that game years ago in the playoffs for Thomas, who got us out, he's gone there. We had the walk-off touchdown in overtime where Tim Tebow was the quarterback against a really hot Steelers team. I mean, it makes for a great game. I'd love to see that game in the playoffs because the storylines around that game would be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for the Tim Tebow reminder. Obviously, the Bears coughed one up on that Tebow run that cost them the playoffs. It cost Lovie Smith as well. That was a bit of a sliding doors moment. Although Lovie Smith paid us back by winning a game he wasn't supposed to for the Texans, which gave the Bears Caleb Williams. So the football gods take it and the football gods give it back sometimes. Falcons and the Saints, speaking of the football gods, because both the Panthers and the Bucks had their fates beyond their control, Kieran, in that one. And the Panthers needed the Falcons to win, and that indeed is what transpired. But it wasn't, as it never is, an easy road for the Falcons.
No, 100%. And it was one of those games. It was such a unique contest in that these two teams had absolutely zero to play for, and yet they go out and have such a bearing on the postseason. I think there was a good clip of Kirk Cousins. Was it Kirk Cousins a few weeks back saying to Baker Mayfield, "Go win it now. Go win the NFC South." And he's the guy, and his team are the team that keep them out of the playoffs. But I said it to Craig on the show last night. I have the Atlanta Falcons down as the biggest what if team and the biggest what could have been team when you look at the talent, the sheer talent that they have on offense. And when you look at actually the production they got out of the two pass rushing defensive players in Pace and I can't think of the other guy's name, but I mean, they got what they wanted from them in terms of impacting that pass rush to complement the offense. Kyle Pitts got going late on in the season. Bijan Robinson had, we were talking about him as an MVP at one point. He couldn't quite figure out the situation at quarterback, finishing with Kirk Cousins and Drake London. I mean, and
Xavier Watts was probably the best rookie defensive back selected in the draft last year by Terry Fontenot, who lost his job.
Yeah, and teams would they'd absolutely, bite your hand off to have a star-studded offense littered with those kind of players. And
Jalen Walker and James Pierce. Jalen Walker,
that was the other guy. But that's probably why, Raheem Morris isn't on my wish list for as a coach, because you can't put this down to anything other than poor management, poor coaching, the fact that they let this division slip away, or even a wild card spot. It was just a really, really disappointing season. When the Bucks faltered so much, it should have been there for the taking for them.
Brian, the Saints are an intriguing proposition, I think, for next year, and we touched on it briefly when we were talking last night. This was expected to be a lost season for the Saints, and in the sense of not getting to the playoffs, I suppose it was. But they have something in Tyler Shook. They have a couple of other pieces as well. Yeah, they have some business to do in the offseason. They have a couple of veterans who will end up leaving or probably will be traded away at this stage. But Kellen Moore has forged a path there, and he's done more than a lot of people expected him to do. And he's had a good first year, and he'll be feeling pretty positive about next year, particularly, as we said, in the division that they're in, where it's not going to take much to get to the playoffs.
For Shane already called it, Connor, didn't he? He said last night they're going to win the division next year. I think he might be getting a little bit ahead of himself. I think what we've seen over the course, look, they haven't got the best roster within the division. They struggled early on in the season, and I suppose there's that kind of period where a new head coach goes in, he's trying to stamp his authority, and he's probably struggling with what's available to him. I think gradually over the course of the season, I think he's starting to put his influence and stamp on the team. Yeah, you're right. Tyler Shook has probably surprised people. Like, who do you have? They had Rattler in at the start of the season, was it?
Spencer Rattler, yeah.
Spencer Rattler.
Like, anybody who watched the back end of last season knew that he wasn't QB1 in this league. But I think they probably felt like they needed to honour the agreement, give him an opportunity before they brought Tyler Shook in. They probably would have been best there putting Shook in from day one. They probably would have won a few extra games. But he has shown, and we spoke, but I think they're now kind of out of that kind of conversation because of where they are selecting the draft. And I know quarterbacks move around in the draft, but by and large, you would expect like the top ones to go top ends. And I don't think they need to rush or panic on that situation. I think they've got enough there to work on. But it'd be interesting to see, because this team for years has been burnt by going all in. Like, they probably were, unfortunately, like dealing with years of cap hell, and it's kind of caught up with them now. So it'll be interesting now that they can revamp and reevaluate and go again. But it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason in terms of acquiring players and free agency, because there's still a lot of holes there. They've come on at the back end of the season. They've had some nice victories, but for Shane to be saying last night they're the team for me, I think it's a bit very premature. It'll be interesting to see what comes of free agency in the draft for the Saints.
Yeah, but they're a very interesting team to watch in the off season. We're a long way from the off season. We'll take a quick break before we get to the rest of the weekend action.